"Mom, you need to get out of this house now!" Marcus yelled, his eyes filled with a rage I'd never seen before. Jessica stood beside him, smiling cruelly. "This isn't your home anymore," she murmured. My own son was driving me out of the home I'd built. My name is Margaret Thompson, and today, at 58, I can say that I have learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest dangers come from where we least expect them. My home in Phoenix has always been my refuge. A 2-story building in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood with a garden that my late husband, David, tended with such care. The yellow roses he planted still bloom every spring, as if a reminder that true love never completely dies. It's been exactly 1 year, 2 months, and 15 days since David left us. A massive heart attack while mowing the lawn on a Saturday morning. I found him there, lying among the petunias, with the same peaceful smile that had charmed me for 32 years of marriage. The doctor said he hadn't suffered, but I grieved for both of us. Marcus was always our only child. Maybe that's why I spoiled him so much, or maybe because David always said, "Maggie, that boy has been your darling since birth." And it was true. Even now, at 25, tall and strong like his father, with those green eyes he inherited from me, Marcus was still my baby. After the funeral, he was the one who helped me with the insurance paperwork, organized my finances, and taught me how to use online banking. "Mom, you can't depend on others for everything," he'd say, with that patience that reminded me so much of the young David. And he was right. I'd been a devoted wife for so many years that I'd forgotten how to be an independent woman. The nights were the worst. The house felt too big, too silent. I walked through the rooms like a ghost, waiting to hear David's voice calling me from the kitchen or the sound of the television in the living room. Marcus came to visit me 3 times a week, always bringing something, a pizza, flowers from the market, or simply his comforting presence. "Afi, Mom, you need to get out more," he said, hugging me tightly. "How about taking that painting class you've always wanted, or joining the library book club?" But I didn't have the energy for any of that. I'd wake up, drink my coffee alone, watch David's favorite TV shows, and wait for the day to pass. Dr. Phillips, my doctor of 15 years, said it was normal, that grief takes its own time. He prescribed me some mild anxiety medication, just to help in the first few months, but I rarely took it. I didn't want to become dependent on pills. What kept me going was knowing that Marcus was okay, that he had inherited his father's determination and my stubbornness. He worked as a computer technician at a company in downtown Phoenix, earning a good living, and always said he would buy his own house one day. "But not too far from my mother," he would joke. I didn't know, in those lonely days of widowhood, that my son was about to bring someone into our lives who would change everything. I didn't imagine that my vulnerability, my blind trust, my desperate need not to be alone would be the weapons he would use against me. If I could go back in time, I would go back to that Margaret of a year ago, lost and fragile, and say, "Be careful, Maggie. The wolf sometimes wears the skin of the sheep you love most." It was a Tuesday in March when Marcus showed up at my door with her. I was watering David's roses when I heard his car pull up in the driveway. I always recognized the sound of that blue Honda Civic he'd bought used 3 years ago. But this time there was something different. He didn't come down alone. "Mom!" Marcus called from the gate, waving with that wide smile that had made me melt since he was little. There's someone I want you to meet." And then she appeared. Jessica was stunning in a way that made me immediately uncomfortable. Not because she wasn't beautiful, quite the opposite. She was exactly the kind of woman who graces magazine covers, flawless blonde hair even in the wind, a slender body accentuated by a white dress that looked tailored, and a smile so perfect it seemed rehearsed. She wore high heels to my house on a normal day, as if she were going to a photo shoot. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, extending her hand with perfectly manicured nails. "I've heard so much about you. Marcus can't stop talking about what a wonderful mother you have." There was something about the way she said, "ma'am," that bothered me. It wasn't disrespectful, but there was a calculated distance, as if she were acting a role. And her eyes. They were blue as the Arizona sky, but cold as ice. "It's a pleasure to meet you, dear," I replied, drying my hands on my apron before greeting her. "Marcus didn't tell me he was seeing anyone." "Oh, Mom," Marcus chuckled, wrapping his arm around Jessica's waist in a possessive way I'd never seen from him before. I wanted it to be a surprise. Jessica and I have been together for 2 months. 2 months. My son had been dating for 2 months and hadn't told me anything. This wasn't like him. Marcus always shared everything with me, from his first teenage flings to his problems at work. I felt a pang of pain in my chest, but I forced a smile. "That's wonderful. Do you want to come in? I was just making some lemonade." As we walked toward the house, I watched Jessica look around. It wasn't the natural curiosity of someone visiting their boyfriend's house for the first time. It was more calculating, as if she were evaluating every piece of furniture, every painting, every detail of the decor. As we passed through the living room, I saw her eyes linger on the large-screen television David had bought 2 years before he died, and the vintage stereo that still worked perfectly. "What a beautiful house, Mrs. Thompson," she said, sitting delicately on the sofa. "It must be very valuable, a property like that in such a good neighborhood." A strange observation. Who comments on the value of a house on the first visit? "Thank you, dear. David and I bought this house 20 years ago. He always said it would be ours forever." My voice shook a little when I spoke of my husband, as it always did. Jessica exchanged a quick glance with Marcus. It was so quick I almost missed it, but there was something there, a silent communication that made me uneasy. "Mom," Marcus said, sitting down next to Jessica and taking her hand. "Actually, we have some news for you." My heart raced. The way he spoke, the sudden seriousness in his tone. "We're getting married." The words burst out of his mouth. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Marry? They'd only known each other for 2 months. "Married," I managed to mumble, trying to process the information. "Marcus, you barely know each other." "Mom, when you know, he said, with that tone of conviction he used when he was a teenager and wanted to do something against my will. "I love Jessica, and she loves me. Why wait?" Jessica leaned forward, placing her hand over mine. Her skin was cool. "Mrs. Thompson, I know this must be a shock, but I love your son more than anything in this world. He is the kindest, most caring man I have ever known, and I know a lot of that is thanks to the way you raised him." The words were perfect, but they sounded empty, like a memorized speech. I looked at Marcus, searching his green eyes for some sign of my sensible son, the boy who always came to me for advice. But he was looking at Jessica as if she were the only person in the room, with an adoration that frightened me. When do you plan to get married?" I asked, still trying to absorb the news. "In 3 weeks," Jessica replied before Marcus could speak. "We've already found a beautiful chapel in Scottsdale. It'll be simple, intimate, just close family. 3 weeks. They'd been together for 2 months and wanted to get married in 3 weeks. Everything in me screamed that something was wrong. But when I looked at my son's radiant face, I couldn't say anything other than, "If that's what you want, then I support you." Marcus stood up and hugged me tightly, like he used to do when he was little and had just gotten something he really wanted. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand." "Jessica, didn't I tell you my mom is the best in the world?" Jessica smiled, but when Marcus wasn't looking, her eyes met mine for a second. And in that second, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't love, nor gratitude, nor happiness. It was triumph. That night, after they left, I stayed up late, pacing the empty house. Something was wrong. I felt it deep in my soul, in that place where mothers always know when something isn't right with their children. But I wanted so badly to see Marcus happy. And maybe, just maybe, having a daughter-in-law would mean I wouldn't be so alone. The 3 weeks passed like a whirlwind. Jessica completely took charge of the wedding planning, deciding everything from the flowers to the menu without once asking my opinion. When I tried to suggest some Thompson family traditions, like my mother-in-law's bouquet, which I'd saved for years, she smiled sweetly and said, "That's sweet, Mrs. Thompson, but I've already picked everything out. We don't want to complicate things." Marcus seemed to be in a trance. Whenever I tried to talk to him alone, Jessica would appear as if on radar. "Honey, what are you talking about?" she'd ask with that smile that never reached her eyes. And Marcus, my son who always told me everything, would just say, "Nothing important, Mom." The wedding day was a Friday, in a small chapel in Scottsdale that looked more like a decorated office. There was no music, no special decorations, and the only guests were a couple Jessica said were her only relatives, a somewhat strange uncle and a woman she called her cousin, and 2 witnesses they'd clearly hired. "Well, where are your friends, Marcus?" I asked when we arrived. "What about your work friends? Jimmy always said he wanted to be at your wedding." "Oh, Mom, we decided to just keep it family, more intimate that way." But Jimmy had been like a brother to him since college, and Marcus had always been sociable, always had a large circle of friends. Seeing my son get married without any of them present broke my heart. Jessica wore a simple but expensive white dress. You could tell by the quality of the fabric. Her relatives looked uncomfortable, as if they were putting on a show. Her uncle, a thin man with restless eyes, kept checking his phone, and her cousin spoke with an accent that changed with each sentence. During the ceremony, I watched my son. Marcus was more nervous than I'd ever seen him. He was always confident, sure of his decisions. But here he was in a cold sweat in the middle of March. When the justice of the peace asked if he would take Jessica as his wife, there was a long pause before he answered, "Yes." Jessica, on the other hand, was radiant. She responded firmly, smiled at the right times, and seemed to be playing the part of the perfect bride. And when they kissed, I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the chapel's air conditioning. After the quick ceremony, it lasted less than 15 minutes, we went to a Mexican restaurant Jessica had chosen. The uncle and cousin disappeared right after the toast, citing urgent commitments. It was just the 3 of us, eating tacos in silence while I tried to process the fact that my son had just married a stranger. "Well," Jessica said, gently wiping her lips with her napkin, "now that we're officially family, I have a suggestion to make." She looked at Marcus, who nodded as if they already knew what it was about. "Mrs. Thompson," she continued, "Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it would be wonderful if we could live with you for a while." I almost choked on my lemonade. "Live with me. Only temporarily." Marcus hurried to explain, but there was something forced in his voice. "Until we get our finances in order. My apartment rent is a burden, and with the wedding, expenses have increased." This didn't make sense. Marcus earned a good living and always told me his finances were in order. And Jessica clearly had money, at least she appeared to. "To help us with expenses," Jessica continued, "it would be a way for us to contribute to the house as well. And honestly, Mrs. Thompson, you shouldn't be living alone in such a big house. It must get lonely." The way she said it, as if she knew my routine, my fears, my weaknesses. I glanced at Marcus, searching for any sign of hesitation, any indication that he had doubts. But he avoided my gaze, fiddling with his napkin. The truth is, the idea of having company was tempting. The house was really quiet, really empty. And if Marcus was struggling financially, what kind of mother would I be if I didn't help? "How long have you been thinking?" I asked. "Oh, just a few months," Jessica replied quickly. "Just until we find a perfect place for us, and I promise we won't disturb you. You might not even notice we're there." Marcus finally looked at me. "Mom, it would be a huge help. And Jessica's right. You shouldn't be alone, especially after everything you've been through with Dad's death." Mentioning David was a low blow, and from the way Jessica smiled subtly, I knew it had been calculated. "Okay," I heard my own voice saying. "You can stay for a few months." Jessica clapped her hands like a child. "Oh, how wonderful. Thank you so much, Mrs. Thompson. You won't regret it." But when she said this, her eyes didn't show gratitude. They showed something much worse: satisfaction. As if a plan was unfolding exactly as expected, Marcus stood up and hugged me. "Thank you, Mom. You've always been amazing." I hugged him back, but something was different. He smelled different. It wasn't the same cologne he always wore. And when he hugged me, I felt a stiffness in his muscles, as if he were straining to appear natural. That night, in the car ride home, Jessica chattered about how fun it would be to live together, how she could help with the housework, and how Marcus would be more relaxed, knowing I had company. Marcus drove in silence, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. When we arrived home, my home, Jessica walked around the living room with that same calculating expression from her first visit. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't sizing up the house as a visitor. This time, she looked at everything as if it were already hers. "Do you want me to prepare the guest room?" I asked, trying to be a good hostess. "Actually," Jessica said, sitting on my couch as if she had every right, "we were wondering if we could use the master bedroom. It's bigger, and Marcus said it has a private bathroom." The master bedroom. The room I'd shared with David for 20 years. The room where I still slept on my side of the bed, leaving his side untouched. This is my room," I managed to mumble. Sure, she said quickly. "We don't want to take you out of your space, but perhaps you could consider moving into the guest room. It's cozier for just one person, don't you think?" I looked at Marcus, expecting him to intervene, to defend his mother's right to sleep in her own room. But he just said, "Mom, if it's too much trouble, we'll make do with the smaller room." "No," I heard myself say, because I couldn't bear the disappointment on his face. "It's no bother. You guys have the master bedroom." Jessica smiled triumphantly. "You're an angel, Mrs. Thompson, a true mother." That night, lying in bed in the guest room, in my own house, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell had just happened. In one day, my son had married a stranger, they had moved into my house, and I had been kicked out of my own room. But the scariest part was that it had all been presented as if it were my idea, as if it were for my own good. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of David. He was standing in the garden among his yellow roses, looking at me with a sad expression I'd never seen before. "Watch out, Maggie," he said in the dream. "You just invited the fox to guard the henhouse." In the first few days after they moved in, Jessica became the perfect daughter-in-law. She'd wake up before me and have breakfast ready, with still warm French toast and fresh squeezed orange juice. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," she'd say with that radiant smile. "Did you sleep well? I thought you deserved to be pampered today." It was disconcerting. I, who had spent the last year silently brewing coffee alone, suddenly had someone looking after me like a queen. But there was something forced about her kindness, something that reminded me of the pushy saleswomen at shopping malls. "Jessica, honey, you don't have to do this," I said, feeling uncomfortable with all the attention. "This is your home now, too. Imagine, Mrs. Thompson. It's the least I can do. You've welcomed us so warmly. And besides, I love to cook." Marcus always came down to breakfast impeccably dressed, even on weekends. This was also strange. My son had always been the type to stay in his pajamas until noon on Saturdays, watching sports on television. Now he behaved as if he were constantly preparing for a business meeting. "Good morning, Mom," he'd say, kissing me on the top of my head in a theatrical way he'd never done before. "How are you feeling today? Did you sleep well?" The question about how I was feeling became a constant. Jessica asked it at least 5 times a day, always with that sweet, concerned voice. "Mrs. Thompson, I noticed you seem a little tired. Are you sure you're okay?" It was as if they were constantly assessing my physical and mental state, taking invisible notes on every sigh, every expression of weariness, every moment of natural sadness that any year-old widow would have. The 3rd week after the wedding was when Jessica started having tea parties. "Mrs. Thompson," she said one Thursday afternoon, appearing in the living room with an elegant tray, "I've made a special tea for you. It's a blend my grandmother used to make. Chamomile, valerian, and lemon balm. It's wonderful for anxiety." Anxiety. I had never mentioned anxiety to her. "Jessica, honey, I'm not anxious," I replied, but she was already putting the cup in my hand. "Ah, but everyone gets a little anxious sometimes, especially after big life changes, and with everything you've been through this past year, it's perfectly natural." The tea tasted strange, slightly bitter beneath the sweetness of the honey she'd added. But Jessica stood there, smiling, clearly waiting for me to drink it all. "It's delicious," I lied, taking small sips. "Where did you learn to make that?" "Oh, my family has always been interested in natural medicine, herbs, vitamins, supplements. It's amazing how nature can help us, isn't it?" After tea, I felt strangely sleepy. I ended up dozing off in the living room armchair, something I never usually did during the day. When I woke up, Jessica was covering me with a blanket. "You were sleeping so peacefully," she murmured. "The tea did the trick, didn't it? Sometimes we just need to relax." Teas became a daily routine. Jessica always had a different excuse: to help with sleep, for digestion, for nerves, for immunity. And she always stood there, waiting for me to drink it all, like a nurse supervising a patient. Along with the teas came the vitamins. "Mrs. Thompson, I've noticed you've been looking a little pale lately," Jessica said one morning, placing 3 different pills next to my coffee. "These are special vitamins I ordered online: vitamin D, B complex, and magnesium. They'll make you feel much better." "Jessica, I really don't need—" "Mom," Marcus interrupted, appearing in the kitchen as he always did when I tried to refuse something Jessica offered. "Jessica's right. You've been looking a little run down. It wouldn't hurt to take some vitamins." The way he spoke, it was as if they had been talking about me, as if they had discussed my condition among themselves. It made me deeply uncomfortable. "Okay," I muttered, swallowing the large, bitter pills. "If you think it will help—" "It sure will," Jessica exclaimed, clapping her hands. "You'll see how much more energetic you'll feel." But the effect was the opposite. After a few weeks of taking the vitamins and drinking the teas daily, I felt constantly foggy. I had trouble focusing on the television. I forgot where I'd put things, and I always felt like I was seeing the world through a haze. "It must be the grief still," Dr. Phillips said when I mentioned the symptoms during a routine checkup. "It's normal to have periods of mental confusion during the grieving process, Ms. Thompson, especially in the second year, when the reality of the loss sets in." But it didn't feel like grief. It felt chemical, artificial, like my brain was being purposefully numbed. Marcus had also completely changed his behavior toward me. My son, who had always been affectionate but respectful of my space, suddenly became overly attentive. He hugged me constantly, held my hand during movies, and asked me if I needed anything every 5 minutes. "Mom, are you sure you're eating right?" he'd ask over dinner. "Are you sure you're taking your medicine? Are you sleeping well? Aren't you feeling lonely?" The constant barrage of questions about my well-being was exhausting. It was as if they were building a medical file on me, documenting every aspect of my physical and mental health. One Friday night, when I was trying to watch an old movie David and I used to love, Jessica showed up with another tea. "Mrs. Thompson, you seem a little melancholy today. This tea will help lift your spirits." "Jessica, I'm not feeling sad. I'm just watching a movie." "Oh, but crying over movies isn't healthy, dear. Especially movies that remind you of Mr. Thompson. It just keeps the wound open." I hadn't even realized I was crying. A few tears had fallen without me noticing. As always happened when I saw romantic scenes that reminded me of my wedding. "It's normal to miss you," I murmured. "Of course it is. But it's not healthy to dwell on the past. Mr. Thompson wouldn't want to see you suffering like this, would he?" Jessica sat down beside me, placing the cup in my hand with that gentle insistence I knew so well. "Drink some tea. You'll feel better, I promise." Marcus appeared in the room at that moment, as if he had been summoned. "Mom, Jessica is right. You've been crying a lot lately. Maybe it's time to consider seeking professional help." "Professional help? A psychologist? A psychiatrist? Someone who can help you process grief in a healthier way." I looked at my son, trying to understand when he had become a mental health expert. Marcus, I'm fine. It's normal to miss your dad. Of course it is, Mom. But when it starts to affect a person's daily life, Jessica has noticed that you've been a bit confused, forgetful. Jessica nodded gravely. That's true, Mrs. Thompson. Yesterday you asked 3 times what time it was. And the day before, you forgot you'd already had breakfast. That was true. I really was forgetful. But could it have something to do with the teas and vitamins they insisted I take? Maybe it's the medication, I suggested hesitantly. What medications, Mom? Marcus asked in that voice of false concern. You don't take any prescription medications. The vitamins, the teas. Jessica laughed gently. Mrs. Thompson, vitamins and herbal teas don't cause brain fog. In fact, they do the opposite. They help clear the mind. They looked at me with that pitying expression I was starting to hate, like I was a confused old lady who didn't know what she was taking anymore. I sipped the tea in silence, the familiar bitter taste on my tongue. Within 10 minutes, the fog had settled over my thoughts again, and the movie on the television became nothing more than a sequence of blurred images. There, Jessica said, taking the empty cup from my hand. Much better, isn't it? That night, lying in bed in the guest room, I tried to organize my jumbled thoughts. There was a pattern there, something I was almost able to see. But every time I got close to understanding, the fog would descend again, and I would fall asleep without answers. I only knew one thing for sure. Jessica and Marcus's care wasn't doing me any good. On the contrary, I felt weaker and more confused every day, more dependent on them for the simplest things. And deep in my soul, a small but persistent voice whispered a truth I wasn't yet ready to accept. They were doing this to me on purpose. Mornings became a challenge. I always woke up with a heavy head, as if I'd slept too deeply, and it took me long minutes to remember where I was, what day it was, or what had happened the day before. It was like living in a perpetual dream, where the edges of everything were blurred and indistinct. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Jessica sang from the kitchen. "Coffee's ready, and I brought your vitamins." Vitamins. Always the damn vitamins. 3 large tablets she'd placed next to my plate, along with a glass of water and that expectant smile. When I tried to protest, Marcus would immediately appear. "Mom, you promised you'd take it properly. Jessica did a lot of research to find the best brands." Promised. I didn't remember promising anything, but they spoke with such certainty, with such detail about conversations I'd supposedly had, that I began to doubt my own memory. "Yeah, of course," I murmured, swallowing the bitter pills. "Thank you for taking care of me." The mental confusion grew worse every day. I was in the kitchen making tea when Jessica appeared with a stack of papers. "Mrs. Thompson, some bills arrived today. Could you take a look at them and sign where marked?" I looked at the documents, but the letters danced before my eyes. It was like trying to read underwater. "What are these papers?" I asked, running my hand over my forehead. "Nothing major, just household bureaucracy. Electricity, water, phone bills. You know how it is. Since Marcus and I moved in, some bills were in your name, others in his. We're getting everything organized." That made sense. At least I thought it did. It was hard to think clearly. "Or where do I sign?" "Here, here, and here," Jessica said, placing a pen in my hand and guiding it to the small penciled X's. "Don't worry about the details. It's just to get things straightened out." I signed where she indicated, my handwriting shaky and sloppy. The words on the documents were too small, the font too light to read properly. "There," she said, quickly gathering up the papers. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Thompson. You're really helping us organize our lives here." A few days later, the scene repeated itself. More paperwork, more signatures, always with the same explanation. Just bureaucracy, Mrs. Thompson, household bills, address verification, boring things you don't need to worry about. Marcus always appeared to reinforce, "Don't worry, Mom, it's just bureaucracy." Jessica understands these things much more than we do. I signed because I trusted them, because my head was always too heavy to question, and because they made everything seem so normal, so routine. It was just the daughter-in-law organizing the household bills, right? But sometimes, in those rare moments when the fog lifted a bit, I wondered why there were so many papers to sign. David and I had always had a simple financial life, a few basic bills, the mortgage on the house that was already paid off, and that was it. Why was there suddenly so much red tape? "Jessica," I asked one afternoon when she brought in another stack of documents, "could you explain to me more about what these papers are? I'd like to understand." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson," she replied with excessive enthusiasm. "It's mostly bank transfers, changes in ownership of utility bills, updating your will to include Marcus and me as beneficiaries. Testament? Oh, yes. It's very important to keep these things up to date, especially after family changes like our wedding. The lawyer said it's essential." "What lawyer?" Jessica looked slightly irritated for the first time. "The lawyer I consulted, Ms. Thompson. Remember we talked about this last week. You said it made perfect sense." I didn't remember any conversation about lawyers or wills, but lately I couldn't remember much. Did I say that? "I said yes," Marcus confirmed, appearing in the living room as he always did. "Mom, you were very worried about what would happen to us if something happened to you. You said you wanted to make sure we were protected." It sounded like something I would say. It was the kind of concern a mother would have. But I couldn't remember expressing that concern. "Okay," I murmured, signing where Jessica indicated. "If you think it's necessary." The memory lapses became more frequent and longer. Sometimes I'd find myself in the living room without remembering how I'd gotten there. Other times, I'd start making lunch and forget halfway through, leaving the empty pot on the stove until Jessica appeared, worried. "Mrs. Thompson, you can't leave the stove on like that. It's dangerous." "Sorry, I don't remember calling." "This has been happening a lot lately," Marcus said, with that fake concern voice I was starting to recognize. "Mom, maybe you should stop cooking alone for a while." And so, another small measure of independence was taken away from me. Jessica completely took over the kitchen, always with the excuse that it was for safety. "We don't want you to get hurt," she said, preparing another tea with that familiar bitter taste. Visits to the bank became a particular source of confusion. Jessica always insisted on accompanying me for support, and when we got there, I'd discover there were transactions I didn't remember authorizing. "Mrs. Thompson," the manager, Mrs. Morrison said with concern, "you've made several large transfers in the last few weeks. Are you sure everything is okay?" I looked at the statements, but the numbers didn't make sense in my confused head. "Jessica can explain better," I said, feeling lost. "She's handling my finances now." Jessica smiled and spoke authoritatively about investment reorganization, account consolidation, and financial planning. She used terms that sounded professional and convincing, and the manager seemed to accept her explanations. But when we left the bank, I always felt like I had lost something important, like a part of me had been left behind. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson," Jessica said in the car. "Finances are complicated. It's best to let those who understand handle these things." One Thursday afternoon, while Jessica was at the grocery store and Marcus was at work, I found a stack of papers left on the kitchen table. For a few precious moments, my mind felt clearer, perhaps because I had forgotten to take my vitamins with lunch. I tried to read the documents, straining my eyes to focus on the small print. They were bank forms, transfers, and something about ownership. "Transfer of residential ownership," I could read on one of the pages. My signature was right there at the bottom, but I couldn't remember signing anything about the house. My heart started beating faster. Why would there be papers about the title to my house? "Mrs. Thompson." Jessica had returned and found me reading the documents. "What are you doing?" For the first time in weeks, I saw a genuine expression on her face. It wasn't her usual sweet smile. It was something closer to anger. "I was just trying to understand." "These are private things," she said, quickly gathering up the papers. "You shouldn't be touching them." But they are documents with my signature. Exactly. And you've already signed everything you needed to sign. There's no need to worry about technical details that will only confuse you more. Marcus arrived home at that moment, as if he had been summoned. "What's going on?" he asked, looking back and forth between me and Jessica. "Your mom was going through the important papers," Jessica said, in the tone of someone reporting a child's misbehavior. "I think she's getting more confused." Marcus looked at me with that pitying expression I hated. "Mom, you can't go messing with important documents like that. What if you tear something by mistake? What if you lose something?" "Marcus, these are papers about my house." "So what, Mom? You've already signed everything you needed to sign. Let Jessica take care of these things. That's what she's here for." That night, they brought me a stronger than usual tea. "To help you relax," Jessica said. "I notice you've been feeling very anxious lately." 15 minutes after drinking the tea, I could barely keep my eyes open. But before I fell asleep completely, a terrifying thought crossed my foggy mind. I had signed papers about my own house without remembering, and when I tried to question them about it, they acted like I was crazy for trying to understand. What else had I signed without realizing it? And why were they trying so hard to keep me in a constant state of mental confusion? It was one Tuesday morning, when I was trying to water David's yellow roses, one of the few activities Jessica still allowed me to do alone, that Mr. Martinez appeared at the fence dividing our yards. Roberto Martinez had been my neighbor for 15 years, a 70-year-old retired construction worker who always tended his own garden with the same care David had shown for ours. He and his wife, Carmen, had been very attentive to me after David died, always offering to help with small household chores. "Good morning, Margaret," he said, taking off his straw hat as he always did. "How are you feeling?" "Good morning, Mr. Martinez. I'm fine, thank you." He seemed to hesitate for a moment, looking at the front of my house with a confused expression. "Margaret, forgive my curiosity, but are you selling the house?" I stopped watering the flowers, feeling a strange chill run down my spine. "Selling? Of course not. Why do you ask?" "Well, it's just, there's been a sold sign in your front yard for 3 days. Carmen and I were surprised because you never mentioned you were thinking about moving." My watering can slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a metallic clang. "What license plate, Mr. Martinez?" He looked at me with genuine concern. "The big Wilson and Associates real estate sign, it's right there in front, near the sidewalk." I felt the world spin around me. I didn't put up any sign." "Margaret, are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" No. I just need to take a look." I ran to the front of the house, my heart pounding. I looked everywhere, in the front yard, on the sidewalk, near the mailbox. There was no sign. I walked back to where Mr. Martinez was still standing by the fence with a worried expression. "Mr. Martinez, I don't see any sign." He walked over to his front fence, where he had a clear view of my garden, and stood there for several long seconds, frowning. "How strange," he murmured. "I could have sworn it was just there this morning when I went out to get the paper." "Are you sure you saw a sign?" "Yes, I do. Carmen saw it too. We even talked last night about how much we would miss you guys if you moved." A horrible feeling was growing in my chest. "Mr. Martinez, what kind of plaque was it exactly?" A large red and white sign with "Sold" written in bold letters, and underneath was the name of the real estate agency and a phone number. I swallowed hard. "And you're sure you were in my garden?" "Absolutely. It was right there, about 2 meters from the sidewalk, right where anyone passing by could see it. When I walked back into the house, my legs were shaking. Jessica was in the kitchen, preparing lunch in her flowered apron, whistling a tune happily. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, how was your conversation with Mr. Martinez? He's a sweetheart, isn't he?" "Jessica," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Martinez said he saw a sold sign in our yard." She stopped stirring what she was cooking and turned to me with an expression of genuine surprise. "A sold sign? Here?" "Yes. He said he was there 3 days ago." Jessica put down her spoon and walked to the front window, craning her neck to see the garden. Mrs. Thompson, I don't see any sign. Are you sure he didn't get confused? Maybe he saw a sign on another house. He specifically said it was in our yard, near the sidewalk. Jessica came back to me, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Honey, how old is Mr. Martinez again? Early 70s. Sometimes people our age, his age, get a little confused. They might have seen something somewhere else and thought it was here. But he seemed very sure. Of course it did, love. When people get confused, they always believe what they're seeing, even when it's not real. The way she said it, with that condescending tone I was starting to know all too well. Marcus arrived for lunch at that moment, as he always did on Tuesdays. Hi, Mom. Hi, honey. How are my favorite girls? Marcus, Jessica said immediately. Your mother is a little agitated. Mr. Martinez said he saw a sold sign in our yard, but obviously there isn't one. Marcus frowned. A sold sign, here. That doesn't make sense. That's what I said, Jessica exclaimed. I think the poor man got confused. He must have seen it in another house. Or, Marcus said slowly, looking at me with that pitying expression, maybe Mom misunderstood what he said. I didn't misunderstand, I protested, feeling a surprising anger rise within me. He was very specific. Mom, you've been really confused lately, Marcus said softly. Yesterday you forgot you'd already eaten lunch and tried to make another one. The day before yesterday, you turned on the shower and forgot it was on. Could it be that you misinterpreted what Mr. Martinez said? Or, Jessica added delicately, maybe he mentioned that he saw someone putting up a sign somewhere, and you assumed it was here. They were making me question my own sanity again. But this time, something inside me resisted. I'll ask him again, he said firmly. Sure, Mom, Marcus agreed quickly. It's a good idea to clarify, but maybe it would be best if Jessica came with you, just to help translate if there's any confusion. That afternoon, when I returned to the garden to finish watering the plants, Mr. Martinez was still in his yard. Mr. Martinez, I called, could you come here for a minute? He approached the fence, but this time, Jessica appeared out of nowhere, as she always did. Hi, Mr. Martinez, how are you? Well, thank you, Jessica. Margaret wanted to clear up that plaque thing. Oh, yes, Jessica laughed happily. Mom, what a mess. Huh. Mrs. Thompson was a little worried. Could you repeat exactly what you saw, just to be sure? Mr. Martinez looked slightly uncomfortable with Jessica's presence, but replied, Well, I thought I saw a sign, but maybe I was mistaken. At this age, sometimes you see things. Of course, it's perfectly normal, Jessica said in that saccharine tone. It happens to everyone. But I saw something in Mr. Martinez's eyes. A hesitation, an unease, as if he were being pressured to say something he didn't completely believe. Mr. Martinez, I persisted, are you sure you made a mistake? He glanced quickly at Jessica, then at me, and I saw fear in his eyes. Ah, yes, it must have been my mistake. Sorry for the confusion. Margaret. That night, lying in bed in the guest room, I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Martinez's expression. He hadn't looked confused when he first told me about the sign. He seemed absolutely certain. He only changed his mind when Jessica showed up. What if there really was a sign? What if someone had quickly removed it when they realized their neighbor had noticed? What if Jessica and Marcus were planning to sell my house without my knowledge, using the documents they made me sign? For the first time in months, I felt a mental clarity that had nothing to do with the effects of vitamins or teas waning. It was pure adrenaline, pure survival instinct. Something was very, very wrong, and I needed to find out what it was before it was too late. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I pretended to swallow my breakfast vitamins, but I kept them hidden in my mouth until Jessica left the kitchen. Then I spit them out into my napkin and threw them in the trash. With my tea, I did something even riskier. I drank just a sip and poured the rest into the plant pot when no one was looking. It was a huge risk. If they realized I wasn't taking the drugs that were making me confused, they might change their strategy. But I needed clarity of mind to figure out what was really going on. By noon, my head was clearer than it had been in weeks. The blurred edges of my world were beginning to come into focus again, and with that clarity came a steely determination. Marcus was at work, and Jessica had left for what she called a routine doctor's appointment, something that happened every Wednesday and always lasted exactly 2 hours. For the first time in months, I was completely alone in my own home, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I walked over to the computer David had taught me to use years ago. My fingers trembled as I typed in the search bar, small, easy-to-install hidden security cameras. Hundreds of options appeared. Tiny cameras disguised as ordinary objects, devices that could be controlled via cell phone, recording systems that sent everything directly to the cloud. It was exactly what I needed. I called a security electronics store in downtown Phoenix. "Good afternoon. I need very small cameras that I can secretly install in my house." "I see, ma'am. To monitor caregivers, employees." Something like that. I lied. "It needs to be something no one will notice is being filmed. We have the perfect kit for you. 4 disguised micro cameras, one looks like a cell phone charger, another a wall clock, a third a smoke detector, and the fourth is the size of a coin. They all record in high definition and automatically connect to your cell phone. And no one else can access the recordings? Only those who have the password you create, guaranteed, and everything is saved in the cloud for 30 days. Great. Can I pick it up today?" "Sure." I'll prepare the kit and explain how it works. What I did next was the bravest and riskiest thing I'd ever done. I left the house alone for the first time in months, driving the car I'd barely driven since they moved in. At the store, the salesperson showed me how simple it was to install the cameras. "Look, ma'am, just glue or screw them in strategic locations. Then download this app on your phone. And that's it. You can see everything live and even receive alerts when there's movement." I bought not only the camera kit but also a second phone, a cheap, basic one that would be used exclusively for monitoring the recordings. I couldn't risk Jessica seeing strange notifications on my main phone. I returned home with my heart racing. But for the first time in months, feeling in control of the situation, Jessica arrived 15 minutes later, carrying grocery bags. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson? How was your afternoon? Did you do anything interesting?" "No, honey. I just watched TV and took a nap." I lied with a naturalness that surprised me. "That's great. I brought ingredients to make that soup you like so much, and your new vitamins arrived from the pharmacy." When she placed the 3 pills next to my dinner, I smiled meekly and pretended to swallow. But this time, I was prepared with a napkin up my sleeve. "Thank you, Jessica. You take such good care of me." I waited until dinner time when they went upstairs to watch TV in the master bedroom. Then I got to work. The first camera was the easiest. I replaced the old charger in the kitchen outlet with an identical one with a built-in camera. It was perfect. No one would suspect a regular charger plugged into the wall. The second was more complicated. I had to replace the living room clock with an identical one, but with a hidden micro camera. I climbed onto a chair quietly, hoping it wouldn't make a sound. The third camera, disguised as a smoke detector, was installed in the upstairs hallway. I used the excuse that I was checking if I needed to change the batteries in case anyone saw me. The fourth and smallest camera was the most strategic. About the size of a coin, I stuck it inside a picture frame at the entrance to the house, with a perfect view of the main living area. By the time I finished, it was already past midnight. I tested everything on the secret cell phone I'd hidden inside an old medicine chest in my bedroom. It worked perfectly. I could see every angle of the house, record everything, and receive notifications of movement. Over the next few days, I maintained the pretense of being drugged and confused, but I observed everything with renewed attention. I saw Jessica hiding papers when I approached. I saw Marcus making whispered phone calls that ended when I entered the room. I saw them talking quietly in the kitchen, always stopping when I appeared. But now I had a secret weapon. Every suspicious movement, every conspiratorial conversation, every hidden document. It was all being recorded without their knowledge. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a real chance of finding out the truth. And when I did, I'd have all the evidence I needed to prove what they were doing to me. It was a Friday morning, 2 weeks after I installed the cameras, when everything fell apart. I was pretending to watch TV in the living room, maintaining my pretense of being confused and stoned, when I heard Marcus and Jessica talking quietly in the kitchen. "It's been 6 months," Jessica murmured. "The process can now be finalized." "Are you sure she signed everything?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with a tension I'd never heard before. "All the transfers, the will, the power of attorney. She signed everything without even reading it. It worked perfectly." My blood ran cold, but I remained motionless on the couch, pretending to be lost in my hazy thoughts. "And when are we going to resolve the situation?" Marcus asked. "Today. The lawyer comes at 2 o'clock with the final papers. After that, she'll have to leave." "Do you think she'll resist?" Jessica laughed, a cold sound that sent chills down my spine. "Marcus, look at her condition. She can barely remember what she ate for breakfast. She'll do what we tell her. What if she tries to call someone? The police? Who's going to believe a senile old woman who can't even form a coherent sentence? Besides, all the documents are legal. She signed everything of her own free will." I felt tears burning my eyes, but I couldn't show that I'd heard. I continued to stare blankly at the television, while inside my heart was breaking. My own son, my baby, whom I had raised with so much love, was plotting to steal me and drive me out of my own home. At 2 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Jessica opened the door to a tall, thin man wearing a gray suit. "Mr. Daniels," she said with that fake smile I knew so well. "Thank you so much for coming. Mrs. Thompson is in the living room." The lawyer entered, carrying a brown leather briefcase. He had small, calculating eyes and a look that reminded me of a vulture. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, sitting in a chair across from me. "My name is Richard Daniels. I'm the attorney who's been handling your affairs for the past few months." I looked at him with the confused expression I'd perfected over the past few weeks. "Affairs? What affairs?" Jessica approached, placing her hand on my shoulder with false kindness. "Remember, Mrs. Thompson, the lawyer you hired to organize your documents?" I didn't remember hiring a lawyer, but I nodded vaguely. "Well, Mr. Daniels continued, opening the folder. "I'm here to finalize some important matters." Marcus appeared in the living room, standing behind my couch as if he were my protector. But now I knew the truth. "Mom," he said, in that fake concern voice I'd learned to hate, "Mr. Daniels needs to explain some things to you." The lawyer cleared his throat and began. "Mrs. Thompson, 6 months ago, you came to my office concerned about the future of your property and assets. You were very anxious about what would happen to everything if something happened to you. That was a lie. I had never set foot in that man's office. At that time, you signed some important documents to protect your family." He took several papers out of his briefcase and placed them on the coffee table in front of me. "This is the document transferring ownership of the house, which you signed transferring ownership to your son, Marcus, and your daughter-in-law, Jessica." My world began to spin. There was my signature, clear as day, on a document I didn't remember ever seeing in my life. "This is your new will, also signed by you, leaving all your assets to Marcus and Jessica. More papers, more signatures, all mine, all legal. And this is a power of attorney that you signed, giving Jessica full authority to manage your finances and make medical decisions on your behalf." I felt like I was sinking in quicksand. How was that possible? When had I signed all this? I don't remember," I mumbled, keeping up my pretense of confusion, though this time the confusion was real. "Of course you don't remember, Mrs. Thompson," Jessica said softly. "You were taking those strong anxiety medications Dr. Phillips prescribed. They cause memory lapses, remember? Dr. Phillips had never prescribed me strong medications. But here I was, faced with legal documents bearing my own signature. The important thing, Mr. Daniels continued, is that Marcus and Jessica are now the rightful owners of this house. And frankly, Mrs. Thompson, they are concerned about your ability to live alone. Alone? I managed to stammer. Marcus moved to where I could see him. His green eyes, my eyes, were cold as ice. Mom, you can't take care of a house this size. You forget to turn on the stove. You get lost in your own house. You can't manage your finances anymore. We found a wonderful assisted living facility, Jessica added, pulling a colorful brochure from her bag. Sunset Manor. They have 24-hour nursing, recreational activities, and you'll have all the help you need. Assisted living, I repeated, still processing. It's best for you, Mom, Marcus said, but his voice held no love. It held impatience. You can't keep living here alone. But you live here with me. Marcus and Jessica exchanged a look. Actually, Mom, Jessica and I are moving. We found a smaller house that's more suitable for us. And this house is too big for you alone. The ground fell away beneath my feet. They hadn't just stolen my home, they were sending me away. When? I managed to ask. Today, Jessica replied firmly. We've already made your reservation at Sunset Manor. We'd better make the transition quickly before you get more confused. It was then that something inside me snapped. All the months of humiliation, of forced drugging, of constant gaslighting, of watching my own life being stolen piece by piece, it all came flooding back. I'm not going anywhere, I yelled, getting up from the couch. This is my house. Marcus recoiled, surprised by my reaction. Jessica also looked shocked. They clearly hadn't expected me to have the energy to resist. Mom, you need to calm down, Marcus began. Don't tell me to calm down. I exploded. You robbed me. You robbed my house. Mrs. Thompson, the lawyer said in a calm but firm voice, all the documents are in order. You signed everything voluntarily. I don't remember signing anything. Because you were on drugs, Jessica yelled back, losing her composure for the first time. Because you were taking medication that affected your memory. What medicine? I've never taken any medicine. The vitamins, Mrs. Thompson, Jessica said, regaining control. The vitamins and teas I made to help you. They interacted with your prescription medications and caused confusion. I don't take prescription medications. Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time, I saw something dangerous in his eyes. Mom, you need to get out of this house now, he yelled with a rage I'd never seen before. You have no right to be here anymore. This house isn't yours anymore. Jessica stood beside him, and there was nothing left of that sweet smile. She was smiling, yes, but it was a cruel, triumphant smile. This isn't your home anymore, Margaret, she said, using my name for the first time since she'd moved in. It never will be again. I looked at my son, my baby, whom I had loved more than life itself, and saw a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who was driving me out of the home I had built with his own hands. Sitting there in my own office, staring at Jessica and Marcus's triumphant faces as the lawyer organized the papers that sealed my fate. Absolute clarity descended upon me. It wasn't the hazy fog of the past few months. It was a crystal clear lucidity, cold as ice. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a senile old woman who had been easily manipulated. But now, with my mind finally free from the effects of the drugs, I could see the whole scheme with perfect clarity. You guys are very clever, I said calmly, surprising everyone with the sudden change in my tone. I really thought of everything. Jessica frowned, clearly suspicious of my sudden serenity. What are you talking about, Mrs. Thompson? Of the plan, of the brilliant plan you two devised. I stood up slowly, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in months. Where did Marcus meet you, Jessica? On some dating site? Or maybe one of those places where people like you look for men with widowed mothers who own valuable homes? Marcus shifted nervously. Mom, what are you talking about? You're delirious again. Am I delusional? I laughed, a sound that surprised me. Or am I finally understanding? You two have known each other for much longer than 2 months, haven't you? Probably over a year. Enough time to research my financial situation, investigate my routine, plan every detail. You're imagining things, Jessica said, but I saw a flash of panic in her eyes. The whirlwind wedding wasn't impulsive. It was strategic. You needed Marcus to have legal access to the house. A boyfriend wouldn't have the same rights as a husband. I walked to the window, looking out at my garden, David's yellow roses still blooming. What about the fake relatives at the wedding? Hired actors, or perhaps accomplices in other similar scams? The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Thompson, these are very serious accusations with no basis whatsoever. Baseless? I turned to face him. Mr. Daniels, how much is Jessica paying for your services? Because I'm sure a reputable lawyer wouldn't participate in this kind of fraud unless they were very well paid. His face paled slightly. Moving into my house was brilliant, I continued. Jessica completely took over my routine, controlling what I ate, drank when I went out, who I talked to, perfect isolation. We'll take care of you, Marcus protested. You systematically drugged me. My voice was firm now, every word filled with certainty. Those teas, those vitamins, they contained sedatives, anti-anxiety drugs, maybe even substances that caused mental confusion. That's why I always felt foggy, forgetful. Jessica tried to laugh. Mrs. Thompson, that's the ravings of a senile mind. Senile, I interrupted. Could a senile mind figure out the whole scheme? Could they realize that you removed the sold sign from the yard after Mr. Martinez saw it? Could they understand that you faked doctor's appointments with a Dr. Santos who probably doesn't even exist? The silence in the room was deafening. And most brilliant of all, I continued, was using my own maternal love against me. Jessica knew exactly how to manipulate a lonely, grieving mother. The over-nurturing, the constant attention, making me feel useful and loved, while slowly drugging me. Marcus was visibly nervous now. Mom, you're talking like a crazy person. Crazy or finally sane? I smiled coldly. Because I'm going to tell you a little secret. Marcus, 2 weeks ago, I stopped taking Jessica's vitamins and teas. Her face turned into a mask of panic. And that's right, honey. I pretended to swallow, but I spat it all out. And you know what happened. My head completely cleared. The fog disappeared. The confusion vanished. I was myself again. You can't have... Jessica stammered. I can. And I did. And for the past 15 days, with a clear mind, I've been able to watch you two conspire. The whispered conversations that stopped when I arrived. The hidden papers. The mysterious phone calls. The way you treated me like a mentally handicapped child. I walked closer to Marcus, looking directly into his green eyes, my eyes, and I could see how my own son looked at me. Not with love, not with genuine concern, but with impatience, as if I were an inconvenient obstacle in the way of his greed. Mother! Don't call me mother! I exploded. A mother raises her child with love, protects him, guides him. I did all this for you. And you repaid me by planning to steal from me and abandon me in an institution. Jessica stood up, clearly losing control. You can't prove any of this. It's just the crazy theories of a paranoid old woman. Crazy theories, I smiled. And this time my smile had the same coldness hers had had. That's interesting, you should say, Jessica, because I can prove it. I can prove everything. The lawyer frowned. What are you talking about? I'm talking about evidence. Video evidence, audio evidence, documenting every crime you've committed in this house. Marcus laughed nervously. What evidence? You were too confused to install security cameras all over the house, I interrupted. To record every conversation, every confession, every moment you thought you were safe. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ticking of the clock that now had a hidden camera. That's right, he said softly. 2 weeks ago, when I regained my clarity of mind, I installed cameras in every room of this house. Cameras you never noticed because you were too busy underestimating me. Jessica was pale as a ghost. You're lying. Am I? Do you want me to play the recording from last night, when you were in the kitchen planning exactly how you were going to kick me out today? Or would you prefer the one from earlier this week, when you, Jessica, laughed on the phone telling someone how easy it was to manipulate a pathetic old woman? Marcus approached menacingly. You don't have a camera. You were too high to replace the kitchen wall charger with an identical one with a camera, to change the living room clock, to install a fake smoke detector in the hallway. My smile widened. Marcus, you seriously underestimated me. You're monsters, I whispered, my voice shaking slightly, as if I was still in shock. Monsters who took advantage of a grieving and vulnerable woman. But then, for the first time in months, I smiled. A genuine, powerful, victorious smile. But you made a fatal mistake. Attorney Daniels, who had seemed confident until then, began to sweat. What kind of mistake? The mistake of underestimating a mother determined to protect what's hers. I walked to my purse and pulled out my secret cell phone. And the mistake of confessing to serious crimes thinking no one was listening. What crimes? Jessica tried to bluff, but her voice was shaky. Let's start with document forgery. I tapped my phone screen. Immediately, Jessica's voice echoed through the room, crystal clear. He's signing the will today. I changed the date so it looks like it was done a year ago, before she went senile. Perfect, right? Attorney Daniels nearly dropped his briefcase. This can't be. Oh, but you can. I rang again. Now it was Marcus's voice. What if someone finds out the documents were forged? Who's going to find out? It's her signature. I practiced for weeks until I got it perfect. Falsification of documents, I declared loudly, is a federal crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Jessica tried to take the phone from my hands, but I quickly pushed it away. Oh, no, dear. We're not done yet. I played another file. How about we hear about Dr. Santos? Attorney Daniels' own voice filled the room. The fake doctor will cost extra. $500 for the fabricated medical history. No problem, Jessica replied in the recording. It's worth it to make it look good on paper. The lawyer was now visibly desperate. That was taken out of context. Context? I laughed. Mr. Daniels, what context justifies creating a fictitious doctor and forging medical records? This is medical fraud and forgery of official documents. Marcus tried one last tactic. Even if these recordings are real, you signed the documents. Your signature is there. My signature? I pretended to think. Oh, yeah, about that. I touched another file. Jessica's voice echoed again. I managed to get her to sign the last paper today. I doubled the dose of the sedative in her tea. She barely knew what I was doing. What if she remembers later? Marcus, with the amount of drugs I've been giving her, she won't even remember her own name by tomorrow. Drugging a person to obtain signatures, I proclaimed, invalidates any legal document. It is chemical coercion and elder abuse. The lawyer was now completely panicked. I didn't know about the drugs. Jessica told me she was taking prescription medication. Oh, Mr. Daniels, that's too bad. I played another recording. Because here you are talking to Jessica about exactly which substances to use. Benzodiazepines are detectable for up to 30 days. His voice said on the recording. It's best to use herbs with a sedative effect. Valerian in high doses can cause confusion without showing up on toxicology tests. The man collapsed into a chair. And this is going to destroy me. How did you destroy my life? My voice was now as cold as ice. How did you plan to drug me into complete dependence, steal everything I had, and abandon me in an institution? Jessica tried one last desperate move. You can't use these recordings. They were made without our consent. Jessica, honey, I smile sweetly. Arizona is a one-party consent state. That means anyone can record conversations they're participating in. And since all of those conversations took place in my home while I was present, even if you thought I was unconscious, the recordings are perfectly legal. I picked up the landline phone in the living room. And now, I'm going to make a call I should have made a long time ago. Who are you calling? Marcus asked, panic clear in his voice. 911, and then to the FBI. Because elder fraud that crosses state lines, remember the Dr. Santos you created in Nevada, is federal jurisdiction. I started to dial, but Jessica threw herself in front of me. Wait, we can fix this. We can give everything back. Now they want to give it back. He laughed bitterly. When did you realize you were going to jail? Please, Marcus begged. And for the first time in months, I heard something that sounded like the son I'd raised. Mom, please, we can fix this. Don't call me mother, I exploded. You lost that right when you decided to drug and rob me, when you planned to abandon me in an institution to die alone. I finished dialing. 911, what is your emergency? I need to report fraud against the elderly, forgery of documents, and attempted theft of property. While I was talking to the operator, I saw Jessica desperately trying to delete something from her phone. Marcus was motionless, in complete shock. Attorney Daniels had his head in his hands. The police are on their way, I announced after hanging up. And I have a backup copy of all the recordings in 3 different locations, including one that's already been sent to my real lawyer, the one David and I used 20 years ago. Jessica collapsed onto the couch, finally defeated. How did you manage to do all of this? You underestimated me, I replied simply. You thought a lonely 58-year-old widow would be an easy victim. But you forgot one important thing. What? He smiled, a smile that contained all the pain, all the betrayal, and all the satisfaction of victory. They forget that I'm not just a lonely widow. I'm a mother. And when they threaten the home I've built with love, when they try to destroy the life David and I have built together, when they think they can use me and discard me like trash, the sirens could already be heard in the distance. I become your worst enemy. And you just discovered that a betrayed and determined mother is much more dangerous than you imagined. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been admiration, if it weren't too late. You planned all of this. I survived, I corrected. And in the process, I learned that I'm much stronger and smarter than any of you thought, including myself. The sirens were getting closer. Within minutes, Jessica, Marcus, and Attorney Daniels would be led away in handcuffs, and I would be here in my house, among David's yellow roses, finally free. Jessica was pale as a ghost. You're lying. Am I? Do you want me to play the recording from last night, when you were in the kitchen planning exactly how you were going to kick me out today? Or would you prefer the one from earlier this week, when you, Jessica, laughed on the phone telling someone how easy it was to manipulate a pathetic old woman? Marcus approached menacingly. You don't have a camera. You were too high to replace the kitchen wall charger with an identical one with a camera, to change the living room clock, to install a fake smoke detector in the hallway. My smile widened. Marcus, you seriously underestimated me. You're monsters, I whispered, my voice shaking slightly, as if I was still in shock. Monsters who took advantage of a grieving and vulnerable woman. But then, for the first time in months, I smiled, a genuine, powerful, victorious smile, but you made a fatal mistake. Attorney Daniels, who had seemed confident until then, began to sweat. What kind of mistake? The mistake of underestimating a mother determined to protect what's hers. I walked to my purse and pulled out my secret cell phone. And the mistake of confessing to serious crimes, thinking no one was listening. What crimes? Jessica tried to bluff, but her voice was shaky. Let's start with document forgery. I tapped my phone screen. Jessica's voice immediately echoed through the room, crystal clear. He's signing the will today. I changed the date so it looks like it was done a year ago, before she went senile. Perfect, right? Attorney Daniels nearly dropped his briefcase. This can't be. Oh, but you can. I rang again. Now it was Marcus's voice. What if someone finds out the documents were forged? Who's going to find out? It's her signature. I practiced for weeks until I got it perfect. Falsification of documents, I declared loudly. is a federal crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Jessica tried to take the phone from my hands, but I quickly pushed it away. Oh, no, dear. We're not done yet. I played another file. How about we hear about Dr. Santos? Attorney Daniels' own voice filled the room. The fake doctor will cost extra. $500 for the fabricated medical history. No problem, Jessica replied in the recording. It's worth it to make it look good on paper. The lawyer was now visibly desperate. That was taken out of context. Context? I laughed. Mr. Daniels. What context justifies creating a fictitious doctor and forging medical records? This is medical fraud and forgery of official documents. Marcus tried one last tactic. Even if these recordings are real, you signed the documents. Your signature is there. My signature? I pretended to think. Oh, yeah, about that. I touched another file. Jessica's voice echoed again. I managed to get her to sign the last paper today. I doubled the dose of the sedative in her tea. She barely knew what I was doing. What if she remembers later? Marcus, with the amount of drugs I've been giving her, she won't even remember her own name by tomorrow. Drugging a person to obtain signatures, I proclaimed, invalidates any legal document. It is chemical coercion and elder abuse. The lawyer was now completely panicked. I didn't know about the drugs. Jessica told me she was taking prescription medication. Oh, Mr. Daniels, that's too bad. I played another recording. Because here you are talking to Jessica about exactly which substances to use. Benzodiazepines are detectable for up to 30 days. His voice said on the recording. It's best to use herbs with a sedative effect. Valerian in high doses can cause confusion without showing up on toxicology tests. The man collapsed into a chair. This is going to destroy me. How did you destroy my life? My voice was now as cold as ice. How did you plan to drug me into complete dependence, steal everything I had, and abandon me in an institution? Jessica tried one last desperate move. You can't use these recordings. They were made without our consent. Jessica, honey, I smile sweetly. Arizona is a one-party consent state. That means anyone can record conversations they're participating in. And since all of those conversations took place in my home while I was present, even if you thought I was unconscious, the recordings are perfectly legal. I picked up the landline phone in the living room. And now, I'm going to make a call I should have made a long time ago. Who are you calling? Marcus asked, panic clear in his voice. 911. And then to the FBI. Because elder fraud that crosses state lines, remember the Dr. Santos you created in Nevada is federal jurisdiction. I started to dial, but Jessica threw herself in front of me. Wait, we can fix this. We can give everything back. Now they want to give it back? He laughed bitterly. When did you realize you were going to jail? Please, Marcus begged. And for the first time in months, I heard something that sounded like the son I'd raised. Mom, please, we can fix this. Don't call me mother, I exploded. You lost that right when you decided to drug and rob me, when you planned to abandon me in an institution to die alone. I finished dialing. 911, what is your emergency? I need to report fraud against the elderly, document forgery, and attempted theft of property. While I was talking to the operator, I saw Jessica desperately trying to delete something from her phone. Marcus was motionless, in complete shock. Attorney Daniels had his head in his hands. The police are on their way, I announced after hanging up. And I have a backup copy of all the recordings in 3 different locations, including one that's already been sent to my real lawyer, the one David and I used 20 years ago. Jessica collapsed onto the couch, finally defeated. How did you manage to do all of this? You underestimated me, I replied simply. You thought a lonely 58-year-old widow would be an easy victim. But you forgot one important thing. What? He smiled, a smile that contained all the pain, all the betrayal, and all the satisfaction of victory. They forget that I'm not just a lonely widow. I'm a mother. And when they threaten the home I've built with love, when they try to destroy the life David and I have built together, when they think they can use me and discard me like trash. The sirens could already be heard in the distance. I become your worst enemy. And you just discovered that a betrayed and determined mother is much more dangerous than you imagined. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been admiration, if it weren't too late. You planned all of this. I survived, I corrected. And in the process, I learned that I'm much stronger and smarter than any of you thought, including myself. The sirens were getting closer. Within minutes, Jessica, Marcus, and Attorney Daniels would be led away in handcuffs. And I would be here, in my house, among David's yellow roses, finally free. Part 12, Final Justice. The sirens approached quickly down my quiet Phoenix street. The sound I had longed to hear for so many months, the sound of justice coming. Marcus stood motionless in the center of the room, his face pale as paper. His hands trembled as he processed that his life had just completely fallen apart. The son I had raised with so much love now looked at me with a mixture of terror and something that might have been respect. "Mom," he whispered, I didn't know you were capable of. To defend myself, I added coldly. To protect what's mine. You should know better than anyone, Marcus. After all, I was the one who taught you to never give up fighting for what's right. Jessica, in a complete panic, ran for the front door. Her high heels, always so perfect, always so calculated to impress, betrayed her at the most crucial moment. She tripped on the entryway rug, the same rug David had chosen years ago, and fell face first to the floor with a thud. "Help!" she screamed, trying to get up. "This woman is crazy. She's making it all up." But the sirens were already at my front door. Blue and red lights flashed through the living room windows, painting the walls with colors of justice. Attorney Daniels tried one last desperate tactic, quickly gathering his papers. "I can explain everything to the police. These documents are legal. I can prove it. With falsified documents and fabricated witnesses," he laughs. "Mr. Daniels, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise that right." The front door opened and 4 police officers walked in, hands on their guns, quickly assessing the situation. "Mrs. Thompson?" asked the older officer, a Hispanic man with a badge that said Sergeant Rodriguez. "Did you call?" "Yes, I'm Margaret Thompson, the owner of this house. These 3 people just tried to rob me using forged documents and mentally impaired substances." Jessica, still on the floor, screamed, "She's lying. We're family. That's my husband." She pointed at Marcus. "Ex-family," I corrected calmly. "And I have proof of everything." I showed the sergeant my cell phone with the recordings. I have hours of audio and video evidence documenting fraud, forgery, forced sedation, and conspiracy to commit robbery. The sergeant listened to excerpts of the recordings, his eyebrows rising with each revelation. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "How many different crimes have you committed?" Jessica finally managed to get up, but her perfect appearance was ruined. Makeup smeared, hair disheveled, a small graze on her chin. It was the first time I'd seen the real her, without her carefully constructed mask. "You can't arrest us," she shouted. "We have rights." "Yes, they do," the sergeant agreed. "The right to remain silent, the right to an attorney." He gestured to the other officers. "Arrest all 3. What followed was almost surreal. Marcus, my baby, being handcuffed in my own living room. Jessica being read her rights while trying to negotiate a plea bargain that no one was willing to listen to. Attorney Daniels crying, literally crying, about how his career was over. "Mrs. Thompson," the sergeant said as the others were led to their patrol cars, "you'll need to come to the police station to make a formal statement." "Sure. But first, can I show you something?" I took him to the front garden, where David's yellow roses were blooming beautifully. A few months ago, they put up a "sold" sign here. My neighbor, Mr. Martinez, saw it. When I asked about it, I was led to believe he was confused, that I was imagining things. That was the beginning of my suspicion that something was very wrong. The sergeant nodded. Psychological manipulation. It's called gaslighting. It's a common tactic in crimes against the elderly. Well, they removed the sign when they realized it had been seen. But I'd bet it's still somewhere in the house, hidden. Physical evidence. 20 minutes later, we found the tablet in the attic, along with a box full of other materials. Empty bottles labeled vitamins, but containing benzodiazepines, copies of documents with various versions of my signature, where Jessica had practiced until she perfected it, and even a notebook with notes about my daily routine and emotional weak points. It was a more elaborate and cruel operation than I had imagined. 3 days later, sitting in the Maricopa County District Attorney's office was a competent and determined woman named Sarah Chen. Ms. Thompson, in my 30-year career, I've never seen a case so well documented by the victim herself, she said, flipping through hundreds of pages of evidence. Their recordings are clear, the physical evidence is irrefutable, and frankly, they made it very easy for themselves by confessing everything thinking no one was listening. What will the charge be? Multiple charges. Elder fraud, forgery of official documents, forced administration of controlled substances, conspiracy to commit robbery, and a few more that we're still cataloging. And the possible sentences? Jessica and Attorney Daniels could face 15 to 20 years. Marcus, because he is their son and used that relationship to commit the crimes, could face even more. I felt a pang in my heart. As much of a monster as he had turned out to be, he was still the baby I had created. Prosecutor Chen, I don't want revenge. I want justice. I see, and you will have both. The trial was swift. With so much evidence, everyone pleaded guilty in exchange for lesser sentences. Jessica received 18 years in state prison. Attorney Daniels received 15 years and permanent loss of his license to practice law. Marcus, because of the aggravating circumstance of being my son and an abuser of family trust, received 22 years. At the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed me to make a statement. Your Excellency, for 8 months, I believed I was losing my mind. They made me question my sanity, my memory, my ability to care for myself. They almost convinced me I was a pathetic, useless old woman. I looked directly at Marcus, who couldn't maintain eye contact. But in the process of defending myself, I discovered that I am much stronger and more capable than I ever imagined. They tried to destroy me, but they made me more powerful. Today, a year later, I sit in my garden, tending David's yellow roses. The house is quiet, but not lonely. It's a chosen, peaceful stillness. Jessica, Marcus, and Daniels are serving their sentences at Florence State Prison here in Arizona. I receive regular reports. Marcus works in the prison library, Jessica in the laundry room, Daniels in the kitchen. None of them have approached me to apologize. Maybe that's for the best. My financial situation has never been better. The fraud insurance I didn't even know I had paid me triple the amount they tried to steal. The house was revalued and is worth 40% more than I thought. And I discovered that David had left investments I hadn't known about. But most importantly, I discovered who I really am. I'm not the frail, dependent widow they thought they could manipulate. I'm Margaret Thompson, a survivor, a fighter, and smarter than anyone imagined. Sometimes when I'm watering the flowers, Mr. Martinez comes to the fence. Margaret, he says, may I ask you a question that has always puzzled me? Of course, Mr. Martinez. How did you install those cameras so well? I mean, it was a professional job. I smile, remembering, Mr. Martinez, when you're fighting for your life, you discover abilities you didn't know you had. And how did you have the courage to face them alone? I look at the yellow roses, feeling David's presence like a gentle breeze, because I realized I was never really alone. I had the love that David and I had built in this house. I had the strength I had developed over 58 years of life, and I had something they never understood. What? She had the fierce determination of a woman who refuses to be a victim. Tonight, I'll make my own tea. No sedatives, no manipulation, just pure chamomile I bought at the grocery store. I'll watch the shows I want to watch. I'll sleep in my bed, in my master bedroom, in my house. And tomorrow, maybe I'll sign up for that painting class I've always wanted to take, or the library book club, or maybe I'll do both, because now I know something I didn't know a year ago. I'm Margaret Thompson. This is my home. This is my life. And no one will ever take that away from me again.